I'm here with Erum Azeez.
Yes.
She has a background in chemistry. She
Yes.
started a company called SoundMind, and now she's at Messaginglab. And she also has a podcast called Grow Everything. So, Erum, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so like you said, I have a background in actually biochemistry, and actually it's forensic chemistry and toxicology, because I wanted to be Scully from the X-Files.
Yeah.
But that didn't really pan out. Also because the pharma industry was willing to pay me a large salary after I graduated college. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that for a few years, but then I wanted to leave the lab. I ended up, just through a series of events, working with other startups. One was a nanotechnology startup. They were doing carbon capture and utilization before it was a thing. That's over 10 years ago. And then I was living in different parts of the world, but then I had moved to New York. I went to this community biolab in New York called GenSpace. That is where I met Carl Schmieder, who is almost like a father of the synthetic biology movement in a way. He and John Cumbers wrote a book called What's Your Biostrategy? And I worked with him for a little bit, but then I worked with him. I started in 2015 working with Carl for a little bit. Then I also had met my co-founders of SoundMind at GenSpace that same night I met Carl.
Oh, wow.
But then I decided to work with those co-founders. I became CEO of SoundMind and then raised venture capital. And that company was acquired last year. And then Carl was like, okay, you have all this experience now. Come back to Messaginglab. There's a lot going on in biotechnology, beyond biopharma, lots going on in industrial biotech. He knows a lot of people, so it was easy to talk to people in the industry. Which is also why we have a podcast, because we have access to all these people. I wanted to share what's going on in the biotech world with people that aren't in the industry. So a podcast, Grow Everything, is about that. And
How'd you make up that name, Grow Everything?
So I don't know if this is basically. There wasn't anyone really doing a podcast about biotech. I mean, I know that Ginkgo Bioworks is like one of the biggest companies in the space, and they have that slogan, Grow Everything. And we're like, let's just take it, because they're not using it. They don't have podcasts. Maybe they'll want to buy it from us one day, because we'll be the ones who are doing it. But like, people don't just acquire podcasts, and like now it's just grown into something that's beyond just Ginkgo. So that's why.
That's clever. At Messaginglab, what are you doing there? So what are they trying to do?
Yeah, so what we do is we do strategic communications for biotech companies.
And all types of biotech companies.
All types. So,
not just in therapeutics, but really climate, food, ag tech, all that.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And people are like, well, what is strategic communications? Is it PR? And we're like, well, PR is one tactic out of hundreds of tactics that you can deploy to leverage communications to achieve your business goals.
Okay.
So depending on what your business goals are, and that also depends on what stage of company you're in, we tend to work with companies that are on the Series A side, because in biotech, when they raise capital, they're usually spending that money on lab space or scientists or technologists. They're not hiring executive leadership for marketing and communications. So instead of hiring the executive leadership, they can work with our team who has that talent and expertise, and we can do some one-off projects. They don't necessarily need to do very aggressive marketing where they're spending lots and lots of money on advertising, especially on the B2B side. So it's something that's kind of a sweet spot that we've discovered that works for us.
It's like a marketing as a service in a way for a specific type of company.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So can we focus a little bit on the biotech for human health side of things? I know you have some experience with that, with those companies. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing, maybe in the Series A level companies, or even pre-seed or seed level? What challenges are they facing in this sort of economic environment that you're seeing? And then maybe they want to communicate or not communicate. It's one of the challenges always raising money. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I was in the drug development world for 6 years. I was in the lab, not in the business side of things, but now we do work with some early stage biotech companies. And I mean, in the drug development side, a lot of the technology has been figured out, but I think developing drugs for people is very complex because people are different. diseases are different. And I know that a lot of people have a focus. I know at Vibe, you guys focus on rare disease, and that's very important. People aren't developing therapies for that. But even when pharmaceutical companies are developing therapies for maybe common diseases, they don't affect everyone equally. There's side effects, right? So I think the biggest challenge is how do you create a personalized medicine approach? Or how do you create medicine quickly, of course, in a collaborative way, to treat people that are different from, whether it's like they're different ethnically, if they're different age-wise. Genetically, all of those things, and it all plays a role. So I think the challenge is developing for your customer. I know there's patients, but, we like to kind of change it up. There's a value exchange, and those people have a problem, which is a disease, and they're looking for a solution, which tends to be drugs in some regard.
Sure.
Could be other things.
Therapeutics, drugs, small molecule, biologics.
Yeah.
Different types of cell therapy.
Yeah.
But you mentioned they're building for their customer, which is the patient. But from what I see, or what maybe others in the industry might see, is in the early stages, it feels like the customer are the investors, because you're trying to convince them to continue this research and development. So you're sort of creating experiments, or you're designing experiments in order to prove a specific, proof of concept or something, and get that data. And that's what you're selling, so you can get more money in a kind of like a catch-22, chicken and egg kind of problem. Any comments on that?
Yeah, investors want to see that you're selling to customers in the end, right? Because they're the investors are going to get money from the customers because of what you're building. So they'll want to see that you have thought that through. At SoundMind, when we raised venture capital, I had a pitch. I pitched like 200 investors. And I pitched that many because probably the first 100 I did not pitch well, and then I started getting very clear. I had some early stage investors that really helped me through it. But they always came back to, who's your customer? Have you talked to your customers? So you can do this whole exercise and do let's do a user persona and figure out what are they going through, what are their issues, and kind of do it through a kind of a thought exercise. That's fine, but then you have
focus group.
Yeah, but then have a focus group. Or if you can, that's usually very costly at the early stage. But if you can have tools to talk to those customers, find out what they're really going through, making sure that you're building a product for them. Investors want to see that you've thought through that, because then you're helping them think through how you're going to make all this money. Because one of my investors said that investors are stupid. I know that's going to be blasphemous, but the reason they said that is because investors are going through a lot of stuff. They're going through a lot of different companies. They're going through a lot of pitch decks, a lot of data, and they need you to help them visualize why they should invest in your company so that they can make a 10x return, 15x return, some type of return. So they want to see that you have thought through all of that, and I think that's, a good thing on my side.
That's very interesting. More on talking to your customers. So are you seeing early stage biotech companies talking to their customers, as in their potential patients who might use their therapeutics? I know patient advocacy groups often potentially try to partner up with biotech companies, or at least that's what we're seeing recently.
Yeah, I would say they don't, but we encourage them to. So when they come to us, we ask them, how many customers have you spoken with? How many patients have you spoken with? Have you talked to families that are going through this disease and trying to figure it out solutions? If they can. It depends on what kind of biotech company. Sometimes they're platform enabling companies, so those platform enabling companies need to talk to the pharmaceutical companies or whoever their end customer is. So sometimes it's patients, sometimes it's other companies, but the point is you need to talk to the people that are going to be affected by your product. Have you done that? And how many? It's 1, great, you're off to a start, it's better than 0, but 50 is good, hundreds are good. Depending on, again, if you're direct to consumer, thousands are good. If you're B2B, hundreds are good if you can.
How would you advise patient communities to engage or coordinate with these biotech companies? Or maybe vice versa, how would you?
I would say because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is just, the biggest thing, and this is something I've seen and something I deal with too, is how do you get to them easily? What is a user experience for patient advocacy groups or even patients to interact with these biotech companies, these biopharma companies? So is it an app? Are you going to have to make them download something? and then sign up an account and have like a 10-step process to even get started, because that's never going to work. Is it, something as simple as like, all right, text this number to talk to a biotech company, and then there's a text chat that's happening, on your phone. And like, that's easy, it's like, and who is a patient? Because maybe if they're younger and they are very text forward and they love apps, they would love to do that. But if they're older, there's never, because Soundmind, we worked with, our product affected older adults and caregivers. So we were actually like a voice assistant company where we took a cell phone out of the equation, because people that are getting older, everyone that gets older, their physical dexterity starts to fade and their visual acuity starts to fade. 2 things you need for operating a smartphone. So they're never going to tap and look at the small screen and download, and they're not going to do that stuff. Right. They need like a voice, assistant. So that's something where we really thought about our end users and what their daily lives are like, and how do you communicate with them in a way that's easy. How do you get in front of them? And in our case, we were working with senior homes. So they were all living there, so it's easy to get in front of them.
Interesting. So it's important to not only know who your customer is, but how to engage with them effectively, and that's important to like, compartmentalize and then figure out.
Yeah, that's like target marketing. So even on the patient side of things, all right. So what disease state are you looking at? What's the type of population? Is it ranging? And then targeting. All right. So if they're 0 or like newborn to like 18, it's going to be parents.
Very different, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if it's like 18 and above, 18 to like 30, maybe it's like an app.
Yeah, nice website at least.
Yeah, at least a website. Then if it's older, then it's like going to like a lot older. Maybe they're in senior homes, or maybe they're, or maybe they're at hospitals that specialize in caring for that disease state. So go to the hospital and talk to them. Try to be. I know this is just me because I'm getting older. I'm like getting tired of smartphones and technology. The more I can actually speak with a human, that's cool. Even if it's like, on a Zoom, that's fine. But if I can, like, this is great.
This is cool.
This is cool.
But have you seen there's like VR devices out there right now? So like the metaverse is in a way coming, I think, and I think that's something that.
You still think it's coming?
I think the concept of being immersed in an environment instead of looking at a screen, like a 2D screen, that makes sense to me, because we often sit on our computers sitting down, so why not like put some goggles on and be kind of like in a place, not for the whole day, but for like a half hour. The example I'm giving, I don't remember the name of the company, but they basically are able to view molecules in 3D images and like move them around and like change pieces
like
the structure.
Like Minority Report.
Yep, it really is like that. And it's impressive. It makes sense, especially for collaboration purposes. So
I heard that there was this technology. It was like on another podcast I was listening to, and it was like at a Google like announcement day where it was this holographic screen, and it was like a phone call, but it was almost like someone was actually there, like someone could reach out and touch you.
Yeah, I saw it too. That's pretty cool. Yeah. It's kind of like a booth, so it's kind of big right now, how much real estate it'll take up in a room, but that's still cool.
Yeah,
you can see that happening.
yeah, that's really cool.
Just taking moving to a different topic a little bit. So in terms of like a biotech company and their drug development pathway, where do they often fail, especially in early stages? And is it so we have this idea of market risk and technical risk?
Yeah, and because it does depend on what your drug development cycle is. If it's like all in situ, like if it's all like in silico, like which never is a great way of developing drugs, because you're going to have to put it into a living thing, right? And one of the reasons why I did leave pharma is because all pharma right now, even to this day, like they're using different animals, and like, okay, mice, rats, fortunately, I'm like, okay, whatever. But then, they have to graduate into dogs and monkeys, and it ends up coming a little bit, all right, I love animals, so it was a little bit painful to read the reports. I never saw an animal in the pharmaceutical world because I was on the chemist side, but I would get like, test tubes full of serum that came from those animals, and I just,
I've worked with mice actually, so I was part of that in the lab.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you did?
I worked with mice, for a couple of years. I sacked a lot of mice, extracted stem cells from them, so it was useful research. But yeah, I see where you're coming from. There's a lot of animals that get sacrificed in order to excel science. It's sort of like the way it is now. However, I will mention that I think more recently the government did say that some trials don't need to, or some experiments, or some early stage experiments don't need to be in animals.
Yeah.
Years ago, that was a mandatory requirement for a lot of those safety trials, but if you can have an exception now to some of that.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. For mice, I think. So,
yeah. So I mean, there's super early stage, but then obviously you get into the living systems. I think that's just emotionally challenging for people that, I know a lot of people have left pharma because of that. They don't necessarily know all of the ins and outs, but when they start seeing it every single day, it is a burden. But it's like a necessary evil, so it's okay. But in terms of other challenges, I mean, I think it just comes back to you have to develop something. So, the development cycles are very long.
Yes.
And you have to develop something for a customer for a disease state, and you can't talk to those people. You can't have a real time experiment on a human to know what's going on. You're going to just start developing. I think that's a challenge of there's
no real-time feedback.
Yeah, there's no real-time feedback. A lot of it, again, is then you have to go into, maybe there's some simulations now, because I'm not in the lab now, but I'm hoping that that's the case. I hope we go towards simulations, so you don't necessarily have to go into animals. Or when you do, it's just testing for side effects and not stressing the animals to create the disease in those animals, so then you cure it in animals. Well, all animals that have to get cancer and they have tumors because you have to have it in order to see if it goes away. But
that's fair.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
It's not talked about much actually in this field.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you bring it up. It's a good point.
Yeah,
I could see a lot of people also leaving pharma for that reason. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then you also see a lot of people trying to I don't know this, but I hope that a lot of smart people then that see this are trying to build the simulations and the lab on the chip. Mm-hmm. The lab on the chip. The
organ on a chip.
Yeah, right? That stuff I hope becomes more mainstream in the pharmaceutical product development and for these early stage biotech companies.
Especially early stage.
Since they are starting these companies from scratch, are they from day one making, saying we're not going to use animals and we're just going to use this lab on a chip? I mean, I know then, of course, FDA has to get involved, and if there's regulations, are they making that stance and trying to rally everyone around this concept of making drugs without harming animals and people? That would be very
I think that's the direction we're going into, but again, at the end, we're still eventually going to have to present to animals and also humans. Humans are also getting dosage, in phase 1 in phase 1 trials, you're also seeing human subjects getting different dosages, right? So
but hopefully it's
more controlled.
Yeah, it's not debilitating because you've already figured out a lot of the different
thresholds.
Yeah, thresholds, but also any side effects, and using the lab on a chip to figure out all of that. That when you do get to the clinical trials, it's actually effective and not causing any pain.
Right. Yeah. And like you said in the beginning, though, everyone's a little different.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. We're still taking
minimal
risk, but we're minimizing the risk, but not completely eliminating it.
Can everyone have their own lab on a chip?
That's a great question. Let's end it at that. I think that's a really good question. Can everyone have their personalized or, precision medicine sort of lab on a chip? I think that's great.
Yeah. There we go.
Anything
all right, problem solved.
Problem solved.
All right, you're welcome, world. Figured it out.
Anything else you want to share?
No, actually, I would like to share, if you'd like to learn more about industrial biotech and then maybe some biopharma, listen to the Grow Everything podcast. And I love what you guys are doing. I would love to see how I can support you guys. Keep on moving forward.
Keep on moving. Love that vibe. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yay! Great.